In the deep silence of the galaxy, where endless stars shine and forgotten worlds sleep, a single act of kindness can change everything. And this is the story of how a human man found a weak alien child and chose to save her when everyone else would have walked away, and this choice would later reveal a secret so powerful that it could shake the stars themselves. The man was traveling alone through the border regions where ruined colonies and abandoned mining worlds lay silent and empty. He had come here searching for scrap metal and lost supplies, anything that could be traded for food or fuel. Life was hard in these places, because no government cared about the outposts anymore, and the only law that existed was the one of survival. He had learned to trust no one and to keep his distance, yet fate had something different prepared for him on this journey. He landed his small ship on a barren colony that once had been full of life, but now was broken and cold. The buildings were crumbling, the lights were long gone, and the air smelled of rust and ashes as he searched through the ruins. He thought he was alone until he heard a faint sound like a whimper carried on the wind. It was so soft that he first believed it was his imagination, but when it came again, sharper this time, he stopped in his tracks. He followed the sound through twisted metal and collapsed walls until he reached a dark corner of the ruins. There, hidden among broken crates, was a small figure curled up on the ground. She was thin, almost nothing more than bones covered with skin. Her hair tangled, her clothes torn, and her skin carried strange marks of suffering. Her large eyes stared at him, filled with fear, but also with something else, something that made him pause. It was a spark, a quiet strength, buried under exhaustion. For a moment, he stood frozen because he knew what this meant. She was not human. She was alien, her features different, her ears longer, her skin a shade that did not belong to Earth. Yet she was a child, no matter what she looked like. She was just a starving child, and he could see in her eyes that she did not expect kindness. She expected him to leave her behind, just like everyone else had done. The man knelt slowly, his movements careful, because he saw how she flinched at the smallest sound. He spoke softly, though he knew she did not understand his words. He pointed at his bag and showed her food, a piece of bread and a flask of water. Her eyes locked on the food, but she did not move. He placed it on the ground and stepped back, giving her space. After a long moment, she reached out trembling hands and grabbed it. She ate quickly with desperate hunger and drank until she coughed. He did not move closer, only waited. Something stirred inside him as he watched her. He remembered what it was like to be alone, abandoned in the cold of space. When no one came to help, he knew the pain of being left behind, and though she was alien and unknown, he could not walk away from her. He knew he had made his choice. The girl looked at him wary, as if she expected him to take the food away, but when he gently motioned for her to come with him, she hesitated. Her body shook with fear, yet there was nowhere else for her to go. Slowly, she rose unsteady on her legs and followed him back to his ship. She did not speak, not a single word, but her eyes stayed on him as if she was trying to understand why this stranger had not left her to die when they entered the ship. She froze, staring at the walls and the blinking lights. She was clearly not used to such things. She touched the panels carefully, as if they might burn her. He led her to a seat and gave her a blanket. She wrapped herself in it, her thin hands clutching the fabric tightly, as if afraid it would be taken away. He watched her silently, his heart heavy with questions. Who was she? Where had she come from? Why was she left alone in the ruins? But the only sound she made was her soft breathing and the occasional frightened glance toward the door. He set the ship to lift off, leaving the ruined colony behind as the engines roared. She covered her ears, trembling, but he placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, and she looked at him with wide eyes. He nodded slowly to calm her down. She did not smile, but she no longer shook as much that night as the ship drifted through space. He sat across from her. She had curled up on the blanket and was staring at the ceiling. He wondered what horrors she had seen before he found her. He could see scars along her arms and legs, marks of chains or whips. Things that no child should ever know. He clenched his fists, angry at the unknown monsters who had done this to her, and he whispered a promise. Though she could not understand his language, he promised he would not abandon her no matter what dangers came. The girl turned her head slightly, as if she felt the warmth in his words. Even without knowing them, her eyes softened just a little, and for the first time since he found her, she closed her eyes and slept. He stayed awake watching her, guarding her like a father protecting his child, and in that moment he understood that his life had changed forever. He had rescued more than just an orphan. He had taken a step into a future he could not yet see, and though the galaxy was vast and dangerous, he felt that this child held a destiny far greater than either of them could imagine. The stars outside the window shimmered with silent promise, and in his heart he knew that this was only the beginning. The ship drifted through the quiet lanes of space, carrying two souls who did not yet understand how much they needed each other. The human man and the alien girl sat in silence, separated by fear and mystery, yet joined by the invisible threat of survival. She had eaten enough to gain a little strength, but her body still looked fragile, her cheeks hollow, her eyes too large for her small face. Sometimes she glanced at him with suspicion, sometimes with a flicker of curiosity. He could see the questions burning in her gaze. Why had he not abandoned her? Why had he chosen to protect her when no one else had? When they reached a small trading outpost on the edge of the sector, he knew it was risky to bring her there, but he also knew they needed supplies, food, clean clothes, medicine, and fuel for the ship. He tried to prepare her, pointing to the blanket, and then to himself, repeating the word father in his language. She tilted her head, not understanding, but when he smiled gently and placed his hand on his chest, saying the word again, she whispered something soft in her own tongue. It was not the same, but he felt she was trying to answer, trying to find a way to connect. The outpost was crowded, noisy, filled with humans and other aliens. Alike, the smell of cooked food mixed with the metallic scent of machines. As they walked through the market, people stared. The girl clung to his arm, hiding her face behind the fabric of his jacket. Whispers followed them, some voices filled with suspicion, some with hostility. Who would bring an alien child here? What was he thinking? Was she dangerous? Had he stolen her from somewhere? The human ignored them, his jaw tight, his focus on keeping her safe. He bought her simple clothes, plain but warm and soft. When she tried them on in the small corner of the shop, she looked like a completely different child. No longer a creature of the ruins, but a girl who could walk among people. Though still thin and scarred, she stood straighter, her eyes uncertain but brighter. She kept close to him, her fingers always clutching his sleeve as if afraid he would vanish if she let go later. They found a quiet table in the corner of a food stall. He gave her a plate of stew. She hesitated at first, sniffing the strange smell, then tasted it carefully. Her face softened, and she ate with quiet hunger. He felt something stir inside him as he watched her. She was not his blood, not his kind. Yet there was something powerful in seeing her safe for the first time in who knows how long. He whispered again, the word father, pointing to himself. She paused, her spoon halfway. Her eyes met his, and after a long silence she whispered a single word in his language, the same word, father. It was broken and unsure, but it was there. Sound pierced his heart more deeply than he expected, and he placed his hand gently over hers. She looked down, but she did not pull away. For the first time, trust began to form between them, fragile but real, like a small flame in the cold. Not everyone in the outpost was blind. Some had been watching them closely, and in a shadowed corner of the market, a figure activated a small transmitter, sending a message across the stars. The words were simple and dangerous. The lost one has been found. That night, when they returned to the ship, he noticed she was restless. She moved around the cabin, touching the walls, looking at the stars through the window, whispering words he did not understand. She seemed afraid of something, though she tried to hide it. He sat with her, showing her how to strap herself in for sleep, showing her how the lights worked, how the door locked, and she listened carefully, her big eyes following every movement. He repeated the promise he had made before. Even if she did not understand the language, he hoped she felt it in his voice. You are safe with me. I will not leave you. As the days passed on their journey, she began to learn Small words she pointed at food. He would say the word she repeated in her broken voice, sometimes wrong, sometimes right, but always trying. She learned. Water blanket ship star father. Every time she said father, she looked at him with a strange light in her eyes, as if the word was more than just sound, as if it was something she had been searching for her whole life. Yet the whispers of the market had planted seeds of doubt in him. He wondered who she really was, why she had been abandoned in the ruins, why strangers might be interested in her. He noticed sometimes when she thought he was not watching, she touched the scars on her arms and closed her eyes as if remembering chains or pain. Her hands trembled, but when she saw him looking, she quickly hid them behind her back. One night as they traveled through dark, space alarms suddenly rang on the ship. A signal from behind a small patrol vessel was approaching fast, its lights cutting through the darkness. The girl's eyes widened in fear. She ran to him, clinging to his arm, shaking her head, whispering, "No, no," over and over, though he could not understand. The words, the fear in her voice, told him everything. Whoever they were, she did not want to be found. He pushed the ship to full speed, racing through asteroid fields, trying to lose the pursuer. The engines roared. The girl cried quietly into his sleeve. Trembling like a leaf in the wind, he wrapped one arm around her, steering with the other, promising again that he would protect her, no matter what. When the patrol ship finally broke off, unable to match his reckless flying, he let out a breath of relief, but the girl was still shaking. When she finally lifted her head, her eyes met his, and he saw something there, a secret, something she could not yet tell him. Her lips moved silently as if she wanted to explain, but then she lowered her gaze. Again clutching his jacket, he knew then that whatever truth she carried, it was heavy and dangerous. He held her close, whispering softly words she did not fully understand, but words she could feel. "You are safe, you are mine, and I will fight for you always." She pressed her forehead against his chest and closed her eyes, and in that moment, though he did not know the full story, he knew one thing clearly: he would never let anyone take her away. But in the far distance across the galaxy, the signal had already reached ears that were waiting, and soon hunters far more dangerous than a patrol ship would begin to move toward them. The human did not know it yet, but the girl he had chosen to protect was no ordinary child. She carried within her a truth that could change the fate of empires, and the quiet days of safety were quickly coming to an end. Days after the chase felt heavy with silence. Though the man tried to comfort the girl, he could see how shaken she was. She barely slept, her eyes always turning toward the windows of the ship, as if afraid that another vessel would appear at any moment. Her small body curled up under the blanket, but her hands never rested. They clutched the fabric tightly, as though letting go would bring danger to their door. The man wondered more and more about who she truly was. He remembered the scars on her arms, the terror in her eyes when the patrol ship appeared, the way she whispered words in her own language that he could not understand. There was something hidden deep inside her, something that frightened her more than hunger or loneliness, and though he did not yet know the truth, he felt its weight pressing down on both of them. They landed again on a remote station, far from the crowded lanes of travel, hoping to disappear among traders and wanderers. But even in that place, whispers seemed to follow them. The man noticed figures watching them too long, their eyes flicking to the girl with curiosity and suspicion. She clung to his sleeve, every step, her small voice whispering "Father" whenever strangers drew too close. The word, though broken, was filled with desperate trust. That night, as they rested in the station inn, the man awoke to the sound of the girl whimpering. He rushed to her side and found her trapped in a nightmare, her body shaking, her voice crying out words he could not understand. When she finally woke, tears ran down her face. She clutched his shirt and buried her head in his chest, whispering the word "Father" again and again. He held her gently, whispering soft promises. "You are safe, you are safe," he said, though deep inside he feared his words were only temporary. The next day their fears came true. Armored figures entered the station, their steps heavy, their helmets shining with strange symbols. The girl froze the moment she saw them, her face drained of color, her body shaking violently. She tried to pull him away, her voice breaking as she whispered, "No, no, no." Her terror was enough to tell him everything. These were the hunters she had been running from. The soldiers moved with precision, spreading out through the crowd, asking questions, showing images on small devices. Faces turned away from them in fear. No one wanted to get involved. But the man could see their goal clearly. They were searching for her, for his girl. He grabbed her hand and pulled her through narrow alleys, his heart racing. She stumbled beside him, her breath fast and shallow behind them. The sound of heavy boots grew louder. The hunters were closing in. He turned corner after corner, until finally they reached a dead end. His heart sank. There was no way out. The girl clung to him, trembling, whispering words he could not understand, her eyes wide with hopeless fear. The soldiers stepped into the alley, their weapons raised. The leader's voice deep and commanding, "Hand her over, human. She belongs to us." The man stood firm, pulling the girl behind him, his own fear burning but his resolve stronger. He shouted, "Number, she is mine. You will not take her." They laughed at his defiance, calling him a fool, asking why a human would risk his life for a creature that was not even his kind, but he refused to step aside. The soldiers advanced. The girl suddenly cried out a sharp sound that pierced the air and made the very walls tremble. The man felt the ground vibrate beneath his feet, and the soldiers stopped, frozen in shock. Her eyes glowed faintly with a strange light, her small body trembling as energy flowed through her veins. Symbols appeared across her skin, glowing like fire before fading again, leaving her panting and pale. Leader stepped back, his helmet tilting as if recognizing something impossible. He muttered words that made the man's blood run cold. "She is the lost heir, the princess. She lives." Man stared at her, unable to process what he had just heard. Princess? What did that mean? But he had no time to ask. The soldiers advanced again, but this time their movements were hesitant, their eyes wary, as if they faced something sacred, not just a frightened child. The girl clung to him, her voice breaking. "Father, please." Though her language was broken, he understood her plea. She was begging him not to let them take her. With fury burning in his chest, he grabbed a metal pipe from the ground and stood his ground, though hopelessly outmatched. The soldiers hesitated, unwilling to harm the one they called princess. And in that hesitation, he struck, pushing through their line and dragging the girl with him. They ran through the chaos, alarms ringing behind them, until they reached the docking bay, and his ship once again became their salvation, engines roaring as they lifted off, leaving the hunters behind. Only when the stars swallowed the station did he finally slow his breath. He turned to the girl who sat trembling in the seat, her face pale, her eyes shining with tears. She looked at him as if ashamed, as if afraid he would hate her. Now that the truth was revealed, she opened her mouth, but no words came, only sobs. He knelt in front of her and placed his hands on her shoulders, forcing her to meet his gaze. He spoke slowly, firmly. "I do not care who you are, princess, or not. You are my child, and no one will take you from me." Her eyes filled with tears, but this time they were not only of fear, they were of relief. She threw her arms around his neck, holding him tighter than ever, whispering, "Father," again and again, the word now heavier with meaning than it had ever been. Man did not know what kind of storm they had just entered, but he knew one thing clearly: the girl was no ordinary orphan. She was the lost heir to a throne, and because of that their enemies would never stop hunting them. But it did not matter to him, because his promise was the same: he would protect her, even if it meant fighting an empire far away across the stars. The news spread like fire. The lost princess had been found. Factions stirred, armies whispered rebellion and war. The man and the girl were no longer only survivors. They had become the center of a story that would soon engulf the entire galaxy. The ship drifted silently through the cold sea of stars, carrying with it a secret so powerful it could ignite wars across worlds. The human man sat at the controls, his face tight with worry, while the alien girl, now revealed as the lost princess, sat wrapped in a blanket behind him, staring at the endless void outside. She was quiet, but her silence was heavy with thoughts. Her Hands kept tightening into fists, then loosening again, as if she could not decide whether to run from her fate or face Ive. Had always known there was something different about her, but he had not imagined this. She was not only a child in need of protection, she was the heir of a dynasty that stretched across planets. Her blood carried symbols that glowed with ancient power, and her name was whispered with fear and reverence by soldiers who should have crushed them, yet to him, she was still just a child, the same fragile girl he had pulled from the ruins and fed with his last piece of bread. As they traveled, he noticed the way she looked at him, sometimes with guilt, sometimes with longing, her lips parting as if to speak before closing again. Finally, one night when the stars burned brighter than usual, she whispered in her broken human tongue, "I am sorry." He turned to her, confused. She lowered her eyes, ashamed, her voice shaking. "They want me, not you. I bring danger. You should let me go." He felt his chest tighten at those words. He walked to her, knelt beside her, and shook his head firmly. "No, you are my child princess, or not, you are mine. Nothing will change that." Her eyes widened, and tears welled up, but he continued softly, "I did not save you because you were safe to keep. I saved you because you were alone. I will never let you go." She buried her face against him, sobbing quietly, and for a long while he held her, letting her tears soak his shirt. But even as he comforted her, he knew the truth: they could not run forever. The hunters would return stronger than before, and sooner or later, the galaxy would demand its princess. Not long after their moment of peace, a message reached their ship. It was a desperate signal sent in code. A group of loyalists, still alive, scattered across colonies. They begged the princess to come forward. They told stories of a throne stolen by force, of her people suffering under the usurpers, of an empire crumbling without its rightful heir. The man read the message silently, but the girl heard enough to understand. Her small hands shook as she whispered, "No, I cannot. I am not strong enough. I am just a child." He looked at her and saw both truth and lie. She was still a child, but she was also more than that. He remembered the way the very ground shook when she cried out in fear, her blood glowing with ancient power. She was not ordinary. She was meant to lead, but he could not push her into such a burden, not when she still carried the wounds of chains and abandonment. Instead, he said gently, "Strength does not mean no fear. It means standing even when you are afraid, and you are stronger than you know." She listened, her tears silent this time, and for the first time she did not say no. Instead, she whispered a single word. Maybe their journey led them to a hidden base, where the loyalists had gathered, men and women of her kind, some wounded, some old, some young. When they saw her step from the ship, they dropped to their knees, calling her by a name she had long forgotten, calling her their princess. The girl froze, her eyes wide with shock. She looked back at the human, her body trembling, but he gave her a steady nod. She took a small step forward, then another, until finally she stood before them, her thin frame wrapped in a blanket, yet her presence filled the room. Loyalists begged her to lead them. They spoke of oppression, of children starving, of families torn apart. They told her only she had the right to take back the throne and bring peace again. The girl listened, her hands clutching the fabric of her blanket, her lips trembling. She looked at the man, silently begging him to decide for her, but he shook his head softly. "This is your choice, not mine. Whatever you choose, I will stand beside you." Weight of those words settled on her heart that night. She could not sleep. She sat staring at the stars, whispering to herself in her language fragments of prayers or memories. He watched her from a distance, knowing the storm inside her. He wanted to take the burden away, but he knew he could not in the end. It was hers to carry. She was more than his child now. She was a symbol of hope to her people. At dawn, she walked to him, her eyes swollen but her voice steady. "I will try," she said. He saw the fear still there, but also a new fire. He smiled sadly, proud of her, more than words could say, and he answered, "Then I will fight at your side always." From that moment things changed. The girl began to train under the loyalists. They showed her old traditions, the ancient signs of her bloodline, the history of her throne. She struggled, her body still weak, her spirit still scarred. But every time she faltered, She remembered the human's word strength means standing even when afraid, and she stood again. The man watched her grow, not just in skill, but in spirit. She was still the child who whispered father when scared, but she was also becoming the princess her people needed. He saw how they looked at her with awe and how she slowly began to accept their faith in her. But he also saw the shadow on her face. Whenever she thought of what was coming, war news spread quickly across the stars. The lost princess had risen, and soon entire systems pledged their loyalty. The usurpers, however, were not blind. They sent their armies, burning villages, destroying ships, crushing anyone who dared whisper her name. The galaxy trembled as the clash drew near. One night, as they prepared for the coming storm, the girl sat with the man alone in the quiet of the ship. She turned to him and asked in her small voice, "What if I fail? What if I lose them all?" He took her hands gently and answered, "Then you will still have me. You will always have me." Her eyes filled with tears, but also with strength. She whispered, "I will not fail because I have you." And for the first time, she smiled, not a small shy smile, but one full of light. The days ahead promised blood and fire. But in that moment, as father and daughter sat together among the stars, they knew they were ready to face it, because together they had already survived the impossible, and now they would stand against the galaxy itself. The sky of the battlefield burned with the light of countless ships. The usurper's fleet stretched across the stars, a wall of steel and fire that threatened to crush everything in its path. Below, on the ground, soldiers of many worlds prepared for war, banners of the lost dynasty rising. For the first time in years, they whispered her name. The princess returned, their last hope, the one who carried both the blood of rulers and the lessons of humanity in her heart. The girl, now older in spirit, though still small in body, stood at the center of her people, her plain clothes replaced with armor too large, yet fitted with care, a symbol of her new role. Her hands shook as she looked at the army waiting for her command. She remembered the ruins where she had once hidden, starving. She remembered the chains, the fear, the nights crying in silence, and she remembered the human who had taken her in, who had given her food, warmth, and a word that meant everything. Father. She turned her head and saw him standing beside her. Not in royal armor, not with medals or ranks, but with simple gear, his eyes steady on her, filled with pride and unshakable faith. The battle began with thunder, the enemy ships raining fire, the ground trembling under the weight of machines. The loyalists fought with desperation, but they were outnumbered. Their lines began to falter. Men shouted in fear. The girl felt her heart sink. She wanted to run, to hide, to be that broken child again. But then she saw her people looking at her, their eyes begging her to stand. She heard the human's voice in her memory. Strength means standing even when afraid. She stepped forward, raising her hand, though it shook. Her voice rang out across the system, not strong, not polished, but true. She cried to them, "Fight not for me, fight for your families, fight for your freedom, fight, because we will no longer bow to cruelty." Her words echoed through the soldiers' hearts, and a roar answered her, a roar of courage. The lines steadied, the broken became strong. Again she felt power move through her, not just in spirit, but in blood, the ancient glow returning, symbols burning across her skin, energy rushing through her veins. She lifted her hand to the sky, and the very air shook. Lightning tore across the enemy lines, their ships stuttering. As systems failed, the soldiers gasped in awe, whispering that their princess carried the power of their ancestors. Enemy struck harder, sending their strongest units to crush her line, but the human fought at her side, his pipe replaced by a blade and a rifle, his body moving with determination. He was only one man among thousands, yet wherever he stood, soldiers around him felt braver, because he fought not for glory, not for riches, but for his child. Every time she faltered, he was there, calling her name, reminding her with his eyes that she was not alone. The battle raged for hours. Worlds shook under the clash of machines and armies, but slowly the tide began to turn. The loyalists pressed forward, driven by faith in the girl and her protector. The enemy leader, furious, ordered a direct strike at the princess himself, his massive warship Descending like a beast of metal fire, raining upon the battlefield, the girl stumbled, her strength fading from exhaustion, her body shaking. She whispered in fear, "Father, I cannot." He gripped her shoulders firmly, forcing her to meet his eyes. "Yes, you can. You are more than you believe. I am here, always." She nodded through tears, gathering her last strength, her blood glowing brighter than ever before. With a cry that tore through the heavens, she unleashed a storm of light that ripped across the battlefield, blinding the enemy, shattering weapons, and forcing the warship to the ground. Soldiers watched in stunned silence as the usurper fell, defeated by the very child they had once thought dead. She collapsed to her knees, trembling, tears running down her face. But when she looked up, she saw her people kneeling all around her, their voices rising as one. "Long live the princess, long live the crown, long live the hope of the stars." War was over, victory was theirs, but the girl did not run to the throne. She ran to the man who had never left her. She threw her arms around him, holding him tightly, whispering through her tears, "Father, we won." He held her just as tightly, his own eyes wet with pride and relief. "No," he said softly, "you won. You gave them hope." She shook her head, pressing her face to his chest. "We won because you gave me strength. Without you, I am nothing." He smiled and answered, "No, with you, I am everything." Days later, when the palace was restored and the throne room opened once more, the girl stood before her people, dressed in robes of her dynasty, but she did not walk alone. At her side stood the human, no crown upon his head, no title. But when she took the throne, she spoke loudly, so all could hear. "I am your princess, your heir, your leader. But I am also a child of the man who saved me. This human is my father. He taught me love and kindness. He showed me strength when I had none. He gave me a family when I was lost. Without him, I would not be standing here today." The hall filled with voices of respect and awe. Never before had a human stood in such a place, but none dared question her choice, for they saw the truth in her eyes. This was not weakness, this was unity. This was strength of a new kind, and so the galaxy changed under her rule. She brought justice instead of cruelty, peace instead of fear. She rebuilt worlds and healed wounds, not only with her power, but with the lessons she had learned from a simple man who once chose to save a broken child in the ruins. Her people called her the light of the dynasty, but to him she was always just his daughter. In the quiet moments when the wars ended and peace stretched across the stars, they would sit together in the palace garden, watching the stars, the girl leaning her head against his arm, whispering softly, "Father, thank you." And he would smile, knowing their journey had been worth every risk, every battle, every scar, because they had found each other, and together they had changed not just their own lives, but the fate of worlds. The story that began in silence and ruin ended in light and hope. A human and an alien princess, bound not by blood, but by love, a bond that no throne, no crown, and no empire could ever break. The end.